a boot crashed into the side of a wooden crate. The pup inside didn't even whimper. It just trembled, ribs showing through thin fur, one back leg twisted. A heavy hand reached in and yanked it up by the scruff. 5 copper, the trader spat, or this thing goes in the river by sundown. Around the stall, nobody moved. Nobody wanted a dying runt. A small figure pushed through the crowd, dragging her own bad leg behind her. Her hood slipped back. Hair the color of pale wheat. Eyes too tired for someone so young. She held out 5 copper coins in a shaking hand. The trader laughed. Take it then, cripple. Both of you can die together. Her name was Marin. The pup in her arms wasn't what anyone thought it was. And what that pup truly was would shake an entire kingdom. Stay with me on this one. The walk home was long. Marin lived in a one-room hut on the eastern edge of the Pack territory. The roof leaked. The door didn't quite close. And in winter, the wind came right through the wall like the wall wasn't even there. But it was hers. She'd built half of it with her own hands when nobody else would help her. That's the kind of life she had. In the kingdom of Vair, every wolf was ranked. Alphas at the top. Then betas. Then omegas at the bottom. And then there was Marin. Born an omega, which was bad enough. But she couldn't even shift. A bad fall when she was 7 had crushed something inside her that never grew back. Her left leg dragged. Her wolf side never woke up. The pack called her broken. Some called her worse. Her own mother had died of fever 6 years back. Her father had walked out before she was born. She lived alone, on 5 copper a week from washing other people's linen down at the river. 5 copper was all she had left in the world when she walked into that market. And she just spent it on a dying pup. She didn't regret it. Not for 1 second. She got him home and set him by the fire. Pulled an old wool blanket off her own bed. Wrapped him in it. He was so light it scared her. Like holding a bundle of sticks. She named him Ash. Because the fur on the top of his head was the color of cold ashes after the fire's gone out. The first night she didn't sleep. She sat on the floor next to him, dipping a corner of cloth in warm broth and letting it touch his lips. Drop by drop. Hour by hour. By midnight, he'd swallowed maybe a thimbleful. By dawn, he opened one eye and looked at her. She wept. Quietly. So he wouldn't be scared. Now here's the thing about Marin. She was small. She was crippled. She had nothing. But she was the kind of person who, if you gave her one chance, just one, would not waste it. And she had decided this pup was getting his chance. By the second day, Ash drank from a bowl. By the third, he stood. Shaky. Wobbling on 3 good legs and 1 twisted one. Same as her. She laughed for the first time in weeks. He didn't laugh back, but he leaned his small head against her knee, and that was close enough. The trouble started on the morning of day 3. She was at the well drawing water when old Myra from 2 huts over walked up. Myra wasn't unkind. Just nosy. She glanced at Marin's hands. They say you bought a runt. I bought a pup. Same thing. He's not a runt. Myra squinted at her. What is he then? Marin didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure herself. The night before, when she'd lifted Ash to put him in the blanket, she'd noticed something strange. Beneath the thin, patchy fur, there were faint streaks of silver running along his spine. Not gray. Silver. The kind of silver that catches firelight and throws it back. She'd never seen fur like that on any wolf, alive or dead. But she said none of that. She just shrugged. He's mine. That's all. Myra shook her head and walked off. Then halfway down the path, she stopped and looked back. Be careful, child. Things found cheap usually cost the buyer more in the end. Marin carried her water home and tried not to think about it. That night the wind shifted. It came from the east, off the high ridge that marked the edge of the deep wood. Nobody in the pack went into the deep wood. Not even the strongest alphas. There were things in there older than the pack itself. Around midnight she heard a howl. It wasn't a normal howl. It was deep, long, and it wasn't coming from any of the pack's known territories. It came from somewhere far past the ridge. Far past where wolves should be. Ash, curled up by the fire, lifted his small head. His ears went up. And for one moment, the firelight caught his eyes, and they were not the eyes of a sick pup. They were sharp, steady, old. The howl came again. Closer this time. Ash lowered his head. He went back to sleep. Marin did not. She sat by the door with a kitchen knife in her hand until the sun came up. Believe me, she had a feeling. The kind of feeling that says something out there knows where you are now. She didn't know how right she was. By the fourth morning, Ash was a different animal. The twisted back leg, the one that had hung crooked and useless, had straightened. Just like that. Overnight. The patchy fur was filling in with thick, glossy hair. The silver streaks along his spine were now plain to see, even in daylight. He stood at the door, eyes bright, ears up, watching the world like he owned it. Marin stared at him from across the room. She'd been around hurt animals her whole life. Pups that recovered. Old dogs that got better. None of them did this. Nothing did this. He was healing too fast. Way too fast. She went outside to gather wild garlic. She told herself she was being stupid. That it was a blessing. That she should stop questioning it and just be grateful. She was kneeling in the dirt by the edge of the wood, fingers in the soil, when she heard the boots. 3 pairs. She looked up. Coming down the path were 3 men she knew on sight. Pack enforcers. The kind of betas who did Alpha Braun's dirty work. The tall one in front was named Garrick. He was the worst of them. He liked his work. You could tell by the way he smiled. Marin, he said. Almost gentle. That was a bad sign. What do you want? Heard you bought yourself a little friend. She didn't answer. Alpha Braun sent us to have a look. Just a look. She got to her feet. Slow. The bad leg made her unsteady. Garrick watched her struggle and smiled wider. Where is it? In the hut. Show us. She didn't move. Now here's the thing about Alpha Braun. He wasn't the king. The kingdom had a king, Alpha King Kale Vayer, who ruled from the royal seat far to the north. Braun was just the local alpha. The man Vayer had appointed to keep the eastern pack in line. But Braun treated the eastern lands like his own private kingdom. And anything strange that turned up in those lands, anything rare, anything valuable, Braun took. That was the rule. That had always been the rule. He's just a pup, Marin said. Then there's no problem, is there? He stepped past her. The other 2 followed. She turned and went after them as fast as her leg would let her. By the time she got inside, Garrick already had Ash by the scruff. This, he laughed. This is what they were on about. Then he looked closer. The smile faded. He pulled Ash up to the light. The silver streaks caught the fire. He went very still. Boys, he said. Get a look at this. The other 2 crowded in. Marin stood in the doorway, heart pounding. Silver fur, one of them whispered. I heard stories. Old line. Old line. Braun is going to lose his mind. He's mine, Marin said. Nobody looked at her. Bag him, Garrick said. He's mine. Garrick finally turned around. The look in his eye was something she would never forget. Not hate. Not anger. Just nothing. Like she wasn't a person at all. You don't own anything, Cripple. You never did. Be glad we leave you breathing. Ash made a sound then. Not a whine. A growl. Small. Tight. Coming from deep in his small chest. And the second man, the one nearest him, flinched. Actually flinched. Stepped half a foot back. And he didn't know why. Marin saw it. Garrick saw it too. For one breath, Garrick looked unsure. Then he shook it off. He shoved the pup into a leather sack and pulled the cord tight. Marin lunged. It was stupid. She knew it was stupid the moment she did it. Her bad leg betrayed her. She pitched forward and Garrick caught her with the back of his hand. The blow snapped her head sideways. She hit the floor. Tasted blood. Stay down. She tried to get up. He kicked her in the ribs. Just once. Just enough. She stayed down. They walked out. The door slammed. She heard their boots on the path. She heard Ash, somewhere inside that sack, make one small whimper. And then the sound got smaller and smaller until she couldn't hear him at all. Marin lay on the floor of her hut for a long time. The fire burned low. Eventually, she sat up. She wiped the blood off her mouth with the back of her hand. She crawled to the hearth and put another log on. She tried to think. There was nothing to do. There was nothing she could do. She had no friends in the pack. No family. No coin. She was a crippled Omega who had angered the local Alpha. If she went down there demanding the pup back, they'd kill her in the road and call it justice. She was alone. She'd always been alone. She picked up Ash's water bowl from where it had tipped over. A little water still pooled at the bottom. She set it upright by the fire, the way she'd set it every night since he came home. Then she sat down beside it. She wrapped her arms around her knees. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She just stared into the flames and made herself a promise. She would survive this, the way she had survived everything else. The fire crackled. The wind outside, which had been moaning all morning, went still. Even the night birds went quiet. In the silence, Marin took a slow breath. It was over. The pup was gone. Braun had what he wanted. She was alive. She was alone. And she was going to be all right. She picked up the empty bowl and held it in her lap. The leather collar she'd made for Ash, just a thin strip with a bone bead on it, lay coiled inside it. She closed her eyes. The worst was past. That's what she told herself. She was wrong. Something scratched at the door. Marin's eyes snapped open. The bowl in her lap nearly tipped. The scratch came again. Soft. Like nails on wood. She got up. Slow. Wary. Her hand found the kitchen knife on the table. She crossed to the door and stopped a foot away from it. Who's there? Nothing. Just a scratch. Then a small wet sound. Like a creature breathing through pain. She unbolted the door. She didn't open it slowly. She threw it open. Ash stood on the threshold. He was covered in blood. Not his own. Or some of it was his own. He had a long cut down his shoulder. But the rest of it, all of it, the dark stuff matted into the silver of his fur, that wasn't his. He looked up at her. Calm. Steady. Like he'd just gone out for a walk. She dropped to her knees and pulled him in. She didn't even care about the blood. Ash. Oh, Ash. How? She stopped. Because behind him, in the dark beyond her threshold, something was watching her. It was outside the reach of the firelight. She could only see the eyes at first. Two of them, pale silver, said high, way too high, higher than any wolf's eyes should be. Then it took a step forward. The shape that came into the edge of the firelight was not a wolf, not the kind that ran in the kingdom's packs. This was an old shape, a dire wolf, the kind out of old songs. It stood as tall as a horse at the shoulder. Its fur was pure silver, head to tail. Its eyes had nothing in them you could call dog or wolf. They were something else. Older. Maren couldn't move. The direwolf took one more step. It lowered its great head. And it did not lower it to Maren. It lowered it to the pup in her arms. It bowed. A direwolf out of legend bowed to the pup she had bought for 5 copper coins. And then the great head lifted, and the silver eyes settled on Maren. They held her there. Not threatening. Not friendly. Just looking at her like she was a question that finally had an answer. Then it turned. And it was gone. Back into the dark. Without a sound. Maren sat on the floor of her hut with a bleeding pup in her arms and tried to breathe. Now I want to say something to you before this story goes any further. If you're still with me, if you're following what just happened, hit that subscribe button. Because what comes next, you don't want to miss. Trust me on that. Ash leaned his head against her shoulder. She held him for a long time. She didn't sleep. She cleaned the cut on his shoulder. She fed him broth. She watched the door. The shape did not come back. But she knew it was out there. By dawn, word had already started moving. The direwolf had been seen on the ridge. 3 of Bron's enforcers had been found in a ditch off the main road, 2 of them dead, 1 of them missing his tongue. The sack the pup had been in was found torn open in the snow. Whatever had ripped it open had left tracks the size of a man's chest. The story spread through the eastern packs like fire through dry grass. And one detail stuck in every telling. The direwolf had not run. It had walked. Calm. Purposeful. As if it had come to fetch something, and had fetched it and was now done. By noon, Alpha Bron knew. By 1 o'clock, he was riding. He came with 8 men. Not 3 this time. 8. And he came himself. Maren heard the horses before she saw them. She knew. Even before they crested the rise. She picked up Ash and stood in the doorway of her hut. Her bad leg was shaking. She didn't care. Bron pulled his horse up short 20 paces from her door. He was a big man. Black beard. Pale eyes. A scar across his throat from some old fight. He looked at her like she was a problem to be removed. Omega. Alpha. You have something that belongs to me. I have something that belongs to itself. He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. Give me the pup, Maren. Give me the pup, and I'll let you keep your hut. Maybe I'll even let you keep that leg. She did not move. There's a direwolf in those woods, Bron said. An old-line direwolf. One thought extinct for 200 years. And that pup in your arms is its kin. Do you understand what that means? I think I'm starting to. It means the bloodline is alive. It means whoever holds that pup holds something the king himself would ride south to claim. So I am going to ask you one more time. And then I am going to stop asking. Maren felt Ash's small body warm against her chest. She felt the bone bead of his collar against her wrist. She felt the wind off the eastern ridge on her face. And she heard, somewhere far behind her in the deep wood, a long, low howl that lifted the hair on her arms. She looked Alpha Bron in the eye. No. His face changed. The patience went out of it. At dawn, he said, I come back. With the full guard. I take the pup. I take this hut. I take you. And nobody in the eastern lands will say a word about any of it. You understand me, Cripple? She didn't answer. He turned his horse and rode off. She closed the door. She bolted it. She slid to the floor with Ash in her lap and stared at the ceiling. She had until dawn. She did not sleep. She sat by the fire all night with Ash in her lap and a kitchen knife on the floor beside her. She knew what was coming. She had seen Braun's eyes. She had seen what men like him did when they decided someone wasn't a person anymore. She thought about running. But where? The eastern lands ended at the ridge. Past the ridge was the deep wood, and the deep wood was not a place a crippled Omega could survive a night. She thought about hiding the pup. But Braun would burn the hut. He would burn the whole hillside. He would find him. She thought about giving him up. For one bad moment. Just to live. Then she looked down at Ash, asleep in her lap, breathing slow and easy, trusting her. And the thought went away and did not come back. She would stand in her doorway with him in her arms, and she would say no until they killed her. That was the plan. Dawn came gray and cold. She heard the horses on the road well before she saw them. She got up. She washed her face. She put on her cleanest dress. She brushed her hair. If this was her last morning, she was going to face it with her head up. She opened the door and stepped out. 12 men. 12. Riding in a line down the path, with Braun at the front. Behind them, 2 on foot carrying torches. Maren stood on her threshold with Ash at her feet. The silver fur of his spine glinted in the cold light. He did not look afraid. Braun raised one hand. The column halted. Last chance, Omega. There's no chance. So be it. He swung down from his horse. The men around him did the same. One of them pulled a length of rope from his saddle. Another an axe. Maren took one step back. Just one. Not to retreat. Just to plant her good leg behind her. Braun came forward. And then, from the north road, the road that ran up out of the eastern lands and toward the rest of the kingdom, there came a sound. Hooves. A lot of hooves. Coming hard. Braun stopped. Every man on her hillside turned. Down the north road came a column of riders. 20 of them. Maybe 30. Black cloaks. Steel mail beneath. And at the head of them, a man on a horse the color of midnight, with a silver wolf's head clasp at his collar. Braun made a small sound in his throat. Not a word. Just a sound. Because the man at the head of that column was not someone you saw in the eastern lands. He was not someone you saw outside the royal seat. He was not someone Braun, in his entire life, had ever expected to see at the door of a crippled Omega's hut in the middle of nowhere. He was Alpha King Calvair. The column pulled up. The king swung down from his horse. He did not look at Braun. He did not look at the 12 men. He walked, in the slow, even way of a man who has already decided what is going to happen, straight up the path to Maren's door. He stopped 3 paces from her. He was taller than she had imagined any man could be. Black hair pulled back. A jaw like cut stone. Eyes the color of a winter sky. There was nothing soft in him. But when he looked down at the small silver pup at her feet, his face did something. It cracked. Just for one breath. And in that breath, Maren saw a man who had lost something he thought he would never get back. Then he looked up at her. Are you the one who bought him? Her voice did not work the first time. She tried again. I am. For how much? 5 copper. He closed his eyes. He stood there in the snow with his eyes closed. The whole hillside, 12 enforcers and 30 royal riders and 1 bleeding Omega and 1 pup, the whole hillside stood still. When he opened his eyes, they were wet. And then, in front of Alpha Braun, in front of his own royal guard, in front of every man and woman on that hill, the Alpha King of 7 territories dropped to 1 knee in the snow at Marin's door. Braun made a sound like he'd been hit. The king did not look at him. He looked only at Marin. His name was Ashen, he said. My brother's son. Born of the old direwolf line, the Silvermark line, the only one of his blood in 200 years. A year ago his caravan was attacked on the southern road. We searched for him. We searched until winter. We believed him dead. He must have been carried off in the dark and sold again. He must have ended up in the hands of someone who saw nothing but a runt to be drowned. He breathed out. Slow. And you. A stranger. A woman with 5 copper coins to her name. You spent everything you had to keep him alive. Marin did not know what to say. So she said the only thing that came to her. He was scared. The king's mouth moved. It might have been a smile. It might have been something more painful than a smile. Yes, he said. He was scared. And you were the only one in that market who saw it. Behind him, his guard turned in one motion. 12 spears came down level, pointed at Braun and his men. The king still did not look at Braun. Take him, he said, and the 8 with him. And let everyone in the eastern lands know that the man who dared to lay hands on the savior of the Silver Line has been removed from this hillside, this pack, and this kingdom. Braun tried to speak. A royal guard shoved a knee in his back and put him in the snow. The king reached out one gloved hand. Ash walked to him. The king ran his hand once down the silver of the pup's back. Then he stood up. He looked at Marin. Omega, he said, I am in your debt. And whatever was about to happen next, Marin knew in her bones that her life had just stopped being the life she'd known. She did not go back into her hut. She did not gather her things. There was nothing in that hut worth taking. She owned a wooden bowl her mother had carved. She owned a kitchen knife. She owned a thin strip of leather with a bone bead on it. That was the whole of her property in the world. She picked up the bowl. She picked up the collar. She left the knife on the table. A royal guard took her hand to help her into the carriage. He did it the way you would help a noblewoman. He did not look at her bad leg. He did not look at her thin dress. He looked at her the way you look at someone the king has knelt to. Ash climbed in beside her. He curled up at her feet. The carriage moved. They rode through the eastern lands, through villages, through the same market where she had bought him. The stall where the trader had laughed at her was empty. The trader was nowhere. She did not ask where he had gone. They rode for 2 days. On the second evening, they came over a ridge, and there in the valley below sat the royal seat. White stone, black banners, a keep that did not look like a building so much as a piece of the mountain itself. She had heard about it her whole life. She had never thought she would see it. The king rode alongside her carriage the entire way. He did not speak much. He did not need to. Now and then she would look out the window and find him already looking at her. And he would not look away. And she would feel something inside her she did not have a name for, something she had never felt in her life, settle into place like a key turning in a lock. By the time they reached the keep, she understood what it was. A bond. The old kind. The kind the elders only whispered about. The kind that forms once between an Omega and an Alpha when something sacred passes between them. She had saved his blood. Her hands had pulled his nephew back from the grave. And the old laws of the wolves, older than kingdoms, had marked them for each other the moment Ash had touched her skin. He felt it. She felt it. Neither of them said it for a long time. They didn't need to. In the keep, healers came for her leg. The best in the realm. They worked on her for 3 days. They straightened what could be straightened. They eased what could be eased. But the bone was old damage. There would always be a limp. She apologized for it. She didn't know why. She just did. The king, Kale, he had asked her to call him Kale, was sitting on the windowsill of the high chamber she had been given. When she said she was sorry about the leg, he looked at her for a long moment. "Marin," he said, "your leg is the reason you walk slowly through that market. Slowly enough to hear a pup that wasn't crying. Slowly enough to see him when no one else did. If your leg had been straight, you would have walked past that stall like everyone else. I will not have it fixed. I will not have one thing about you changed." She turned her face away because she did not want him to see her cry. He pretended not to notice. Ash grew fast. By the end of the first month, his shoulder reached her hip. By the end of the second, her waist. The silver of his fur came in thick and bright. The court called him the returned heir of the Vair direwolves. They bowed to him in the corridors. He did not seem to notice. He stayed by Marin's side. He slept at the foot of her bed. He growled at anyone who came too close to her, including, sometimes, the king, who would laugh and back off 2 steps and apologize. A year went by. The Eastern lands got a new pack leader. A fair one. The villages stopped being afraid. The trader from the market was never found. Some said he had run. Some said the direwolf in the wood had found him before he ran. Marin never asked. She did not become a queen overnight. There were rules and laws and councils, and people who did not like the idea of a crippled Omega in the high chambers of the royal seat. The king handled them the way he handled everything. Quietly, patiently, and without ever once asking her to be smaller than she was. One winter morning, almost exactly a year after the day she had spent her last 5 coins on a dying pup, Marin stood at the high window of the royal keep. The sun was coming up over the snow. Ash stood beside her, his great head at her shoulder now. Kale was somewhere down the hall, talking to a council member, his voice low and easy. On the windowsill in front of her was a small wooden box. She opened it. 5 copper coins inside. She had kept them. She did not know why, the day she pulled them back from the trader's hand after the deal was done. She had just put them in her pocket. And then in a drawer. And then in this box. And now they sat by her window in a keep made of white stone, in a kingdom whose king had knelt at her door. She thought of the boot on the crate. The pup that didn't whimper. The trader's laugh. She thought nobody wanted that pup. Nobody wanted me either. And we ended up here. She closed the box. She turned from the window. Ash followed. And down the long, bright hallway, Kale was waiting.